Our scripture reading today is from Exodus chapter 3, the story of Moses and the burning bush as we continue our journey through the Hebrew Bible. So far, Moses has been born. He was taken away from his family, sent in a basket down the river, raised by the Egyptians, and then discovered who he was. And he found an Egyptian oppressing a Hebrew and killed that Egyptian, was exiled, and went and met a woman in the wilderness and married her and got to know her family and shepherded their flocks. And this is where we find Moses now as a shepherd out in Midian, out sort of in the outskirts. So in chapter 3, verse 1, it says, Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. He led his flock beyond the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the country of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The cry of the Israelites has now come to me. I have also seen how the Egyptians oppress them. So come, I will send you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? He said, I will be with you. And this shall be the sign for you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God on this mountain. But Moses said to God, If I come to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. He said further, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, Thus you shall say to the Israelites, The Lord, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations. I love the burning bush story. It's just a classic. And it became even more special to me a couple years ago when we had a little incident here at the church. We had our own little burning bush moment. A couple of you were there at the blessing of the animals. We had set out a nice glass pitcher with some water for the animals, and we were doing our worship service, and all of a sudden, one of the bushes started smoking out front here. And somebody luckily ran over and poured that water on the bush, but we just about set the church on fire with a burning bush, and I don't think that's what God wanted to do. So I now think of the burning bush, and I'm like, oh yeah, that can really happen. And maybe you should pay attention. And luckily, somebody was. And what's fascinating about that is that it came to me that it's really an entirely ordinary thing. Bushes can catch on fire. I mean, they had wildfires back in the day before human beings were the cause of it, throwing cigarette butts out the window or whatever the heck we do. So burning bushes, I bet you Moses had probably seen one before. Lightning strike or something like that. But this one was different. This one caused Moses out in the middle of the wilderness to stop, turn aside, and look and say, wait, why isn't it burning up? This is acting differently than anything I've seen before. And to those of us who have heard this story since we were kids, we're like, yeah, of course, Moses, it's a burning bush. That means God's trying to talk to you. But have you ever stopped to think how weird that is? That God chooses to talk to us through a bush on fire? It's an odd sign. It's one that seems like it's specific to shepherds out in the wilderness. I would expect God to appear, I don't know, on like a piece of toast or something, right? But no, instead, Moses gets a burning bush. And then he hears the voice, and that's when things get really serious. This is God. And God says to Moses, take off your sandals, because you are standing on holy ground. Now, this was not a place that Moses had ever been to before. It wasn't a place that had been venerated by his ancestors. It would later come to be venerated, as Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. But it was just an ordinary bush, an ordinary place. And Moses took off his sandals. And I can't help but think, why do people take off their sandals? They take off their sandals because they came home. Here was Moses finding a new home out in the middle of nowhere, a holy place made out of something totally ordinary. Holiness today seems like a very different thing. We don't regularly take our sandals off when we see something holy. And when I think about what holiness means, I think about being in a church. I think about robes and paraments and crosses and choirs and all sorts of church-related stuff. I think about baptism and communion. When I think about holy moments, I think about birth and death and significant moments in our lives. I think about songs that reach into your heart and pluck those heartstrings. But outside of that, there's an awful lot that does not seem connected to the holy in our world. When I go through like the drive-thru at McDonald's, I don't get a sense of the holy, you know? When I go through the checkout at Giant, I'm not thinking about the choirs of angels that must be singing along with me. These are entirely ordinary things, and the bush is not burning. The holiness doesn't seem to be there. We can open our eyes to the holy and try to see the holiness in those moments. But the cynic in me says, doesn't that mean we're just closing our eyes to all the unholiness all around us? Doesn't it just mean to look for the holy moments everywhere all the time? Doesn't that just mean we're ignoring the suffering, the pain, the tragedy, the reality of people's lives? And who does it serve to pretend that those things don't exist, right? It serves me, makes me feel better, at least for a moment, but it certainly doesn't serve the hurting, the suffering, the lost. And it's because of these things that I'm very grateful that it is not up to me to make every moment or every place holy. Even as a pastor, you know, we get called to bless things all the time, but it's not us. We're not the ones making things holy. Instead, it's God, right? God is the one who chooses to make something holy. Moses' choice in this story was to go into the wilderness on an ordinary day, but with his eyes wide open, awake to the possibilities that God might appear to him. And so God set this bush on fire. God prevented it from burning. God got Moses' attention, and then God told him the ground had become holy. And why did God do all this? Why did God create this so obviously apparent moment of holiness for Moses? Why? Because the people were suffering. Because there was unholiness going on in Egypt. The people that had descended from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, well, they were enslaved. The ancestors were forgotten. You know, Joseph's amazing rise to power in Egypt that saved his family, all gone by the wayside. Long history. So instead, the Hebrews were enslaved, they were oppressed, And the Pharaoh of Egypt was complaining that these foreigners are having too many babies. And if they don't stop having babies, they're going to overwhelm us. And so we have to kill all of the Hebrew babies. We're going to kill every male and only let the females live. And they co-opted all the midwives into this. And I can't help but say, by the way, this same type of action, this still is part of our ethos today. It's still in the ether in our era. There's a theory called the Great Replacement Conspiracy, which says that black and brown people are engaging in a coordinated attempt to have more babies and replace all of the white people. And they're immigrating to Europe, and they're immigrating to the US, and they're going to replace us all. And if you go back and you look at Pharaoh's response to that problem and see that it resulted in the killing of babies, then you might get a little concerned about that conspiracy. But luckily for us, God is on the side of life and of justice. God protected Hebrews in the midst of their oppression. So we expect God to be on the side of the oppressed today as well. So in the midst of this unholiness that is happening to the people, God enters into the world. And over again, ad nauseum, God says, I have heard, I have seen, I am aware of the suffering of my people. Go and save them. Go and talk to Pharaoh. And then Moses, in this beautiful moment, says, who shall I tell them you are? And God says, Ayeh She'ayeh. God says, I am who I am. And I heard a beautiful story. One of the Jewish commentaries that I read on this imagined a conversation that happened between Moses and God after that point. And Moses says something like, what do you mean? And God says, I am with you. That's what I mean. I am present. I am present with you in this and all future sufferings. And Moses goes, you know what, God, we better not tell them about the future sufferings. And God says, oh, in that case, tell them I am sent you. I am with you now. That's enough for right now. So this ground is holy because God made it so. But it's God's presence that is the main event. God is revealed as the one who is, the one who exists, the God who is here when no one else is here, the God who is present. And God chooses to reveal that presence to a shepherd in the wilderness to go and save some slaves. God appears with that presence in order to free people. And that, friends, is a wonderful story. And we could reasonably ask, so where is that presence today? Because, as we mentioned, other than at Blessing of the Animals 2 years ago, the bushes are not on fire. So where is the holy ground? Where is the holiness? And there are so many people, and I've heard these conversations, asking, where is God? Is God still present today? And some people will look at the fact that we don't teach Christianity in schools, we don't pray in schools, as evidence that God is less present and less holy than it used to be. But you know, as always, it's not about the religion, it's about the relationship, right? It's about the connection to God. And honestly, what makes me feel more distant and like unholiness is creeping in is the lack of care and concern and love for neighbor that I see. The focus on profit, the focus on winning, defeating enemies is the highest ideals of life. Even the focus on happiness at all costs. Those things make me wonder, where is God? Where is the holy? But even if we turn a blind eye to all this unholiness, even if we turn a blind eye to the suffering of our neighbors, even if we go further and forget the relationship with God and get so distressed that we think God cannot be present because there are too many bad things going on, there's too much suffering in the world, or even when we think we've got it all figured out, so I don't need God anymore, there's no need for me to invoke the name of God. Or when we think that invoking the name of God only makes things worse. Even in all of these situations, God is still present. Because remember, at the end of the day, it's not my actions that make a place holy. It's God's actions that make something holy. God is here. Our doubts, our wonderings, even our suffering doesn't change the fact that God, the creator of the universe, is still here in this universe. And friends, if God is present, then you better believe that God is working. Even if we can't see them, there are bushes that are burning. There are calls that are going out. There is ground that is being made holy. And I think one of our tasks is to open our eyes, open our ears, open our hearts. Be ready like Moses was, even in the wilderness, even on an ordinary 9-to-5 kind of day. Be ready for God to break in. And I see God breaking in. I do. I mean, only looking at what we do here at Covenant, I see us working to outdo one another in love, even when we disagree. I see people putting love first. I see people working hard to make sure that this place is a place where God's love has the run of the house, like we always say. I see people trying to make this a place of welcome and hospitality and loving community. And I also see us screwing up at that. I mean, I've screwed up at that. You know it. I've apologized to some of you directly for it. But when we screw up, we try to get back up and do better next time. And that, I think, reveals how God's holiness is present here. The question that I've also answered a lot of times is, when will I see that burning bush? When will I see the confirmation of God's presence, God's holiness? When will I hear God's call on my life? When will God finally make use of me? What are my talents, my passions? What is for? What is my purpose? And all I can say is that it probably won't be a burning bush. If it is a bush, it probably won't be on fire. You know, that's already been done, so it's probably going to be something different for you. And honestly, that's probably a good thing. For Moses, it took a miracle to get him to pay attention. Maybe it doesn't take a miracle to get you to pay attention. Maybe you pay attention because you've done your prayer, your study of the Bible. Maybe your eyes are open and you don't see a burning bush, but you see a neighbor in need. The questions to ask are, what suffering person is God putting in front of you to help? What message might God be hoping that you'll hear? Who is God placing in front of you who needs to know that the God of Jesus is wonderfully different than they might have been led to believe? Who is God putting around you that you can ask for care and support so that they can stretch those muscles of care, compassion, and love and come closer to God? God sent Moses out from this burning bush place with good news to share and with actions to perform. And I think God is sending all of us out as well. God is sending us out with the good news that Jesus offers forgiveness, that God is love, that there is no condemnation in Jesus, that hate and fear have no home in this place, and that first Moses and then Christ came both so that chains would break and oppression would cease. This and so much more is the good news that people need to hear in the midst of so much unholiness around us. The news of welcome, the news of freedom, the news that their burdens can be lifted, the news that God is on the march against injustice. The ground is holy, friends. Not because we see it, not because we sanctify it, but because God is making it so. Because God is present. Because God is. So friends, see, hear, and know the holiness that is all around us, and go with God.